out for the winter.
Nearest
Worst.
edge.
Beach water bill down, panels. Wind. All right, I'm gonna call this meeting to order.
And it pees more.
Tonight I need to explain. The February 8th, 2022 work session of the Site Plan Review Technical Advisory Committee. We have a special agenda today because we have a presentation. Jamie McCarty. Let me get your. I don't know if that mouse, does that, see if you can.
No, that's all right. It's pretty simple. If you
All
just,
right.
I'll just
You
tell
can-
you when to advance the slide.
All right.
All right. So, yeah, thanks for having me. My name's Jamie McCarty. I'm the GIS coordinator manager for the city. I also do a lot of work on the MS4 stormwater permit. We're now entering into our fourth year of that permit, and for last year's requirements, we had to implement some enhanced stormwater regulations, and so we worked with the planning department, planning board to amend the site review regulations, and you can go to the next slide. But all this is part of an initiative that we're kind of marketing through the city as Think Blue. So this is all, we're trying to coordinate environmental and sustainability actions throughout the city for water, wastewater, and stormwater. So if I didn't put that slide into my slideshow, Brian Getz would be very disappointed with me. All right, so next slide. Some of the resources that we have that you guys will want to check out. On the city's website, we created a page that explains what I'll get into more. It's called PTAP. It's going to be a lot of the same stuff that you'll see in this presentation. On our website, we link directly to the application, which is that third link there. But the link above that goes to the UNH page that also explains PTAP. So I think those are all valuable resources for you. So next slide. Back in late 2020, we worked together with the planning board. We presented recommendations based on the requirements of the MS4 permit. Those meetings can be viewed here. Those are two YouTube links to those two meetings where it was a preliminary meeting and then the meeting where these regulations were accepted by the planning board. We go into a lot of the details as to why these changes had to be made. So if you want to get into that more, and those are all on the city's YouTube page, you can search for those dates and you'll find those meetings. So next slide. So the first item that I'll talk about is what we refer to as the Land Use Development Tracking Form. From now on, I'll just call it PTAP. PTAP stands for Pollution Tracking Accounting Program. It was a application that was developed jointly with New Hampshire DES, UNH Stormwater Center, and quite a few municipalities that are part of the Great Bay watershed. And what it is it's a tracking application that is tracking land use and the implementation of stormwater BMPs, so that way we have a receipt of when these things are being installed and how much change in impervious surface there is in these developments that are going in. So this form was developed. So the actual regulation that we put in is that site review needs to include some sort of submittal of this tracking form for right now and for the future, as we would hope, if this program is successful, it'll all be tracked through this PTAP system. Other towns, Exeter, Durham, have also implemented this, and it's any of the towns, municipalities that are included as part of the Great Bay nitrogen permit are also required to utilize this application, so. So in our regs, it says you have to submit this. The approval is based on as-built conditions, but we're going to be looking for the applicants to submit it as part of the TAC process, and I'll get into a little bit of that later. So, next slide. Real quickly, the whole program is, the application is administered by UNH, and that's where the database lives. The site administrator is a combination of UNH Stormwater Center and a DES representative. When you guys set up an account, that's who's authorizing you to be a member and a user of this application. So it's not automated. It's it's an email that gets generated and sent to them, and they have to go in and manually approve it. So there may be a delay there. The rest of those, town administrator, that's me. I'm the one who can review all the applications that are coming in to the city. Town employees can have access to it, and then the last one there are the authenticated users, which would be the applicants. So next slide. So this is just a screenshot from what it looks like on the web. You're gonna put in some basic information about your site. And you can go on to the next slide. So who's required? So, in general, it says it's part of the requirement for all site review projects, but we're really looking for the ones that are having a disturbance. If you check off any one of these three boxes, we're gonna want you to complete a PTAP application. So any disturbance of greater than 15,000 square feet, if you're adding any type of additional stormwater management BMPs, and if you're adding any septic on the site. So next slide. On that city's website, there is a hour-and-a-half presentation that DES and myself and some other people put together in this room here for the public, and it was recorded. And it goes through more details of how the application works, how to start an application, these key data points that are needed. But basically, what we need is, and this should all be, pretty simple to fill out, because if you're putting in new stormwater BMPs, you've already done the design calculations through something like HydroCAD that is generating these numbers for you based on your design. But we need to know the type of BMP, how much impervious surface it's managing, storage capacities, what the design storm depths are, all those kinds of things. If you're doing any long-term maintenance of BMPs and the surfaces, like sweeping of parking lots, that can be put in there also. The change in land use on the property, so if it's going from, field forested to a residential land use, what the acreages are of that. And then the wastewater is, if it's going from an undeveloped land and you're gonna put septic on there, or you're gonna be connecting to the city sewer, that can all be inputted into the application. So, next slide. So here's an example. This is the one off of Beverly Hill Road that's been in review right now. So I'm gonna go really, broad on this. You can see some stormwater detention, infiltration ponds in the middle there, another one off to the left. So, the engineer would have those calculations, and you can go to the next slide. Here's a little hard to read on the screen, but here's an example of what the output is in the PTAP application. So in that top chart table there, each one of those lines is one of the BMPs, the amount of surface it's treating, the water quality volume, infiltration rate, and so forth. And then the middle one is the non-structural BMPs, so they're gonna do sweeping and catch basin cleaning. I think that's what it says. And then that last table is the land use conversion. So all the different soil types, type of land use that covers the lot, those acreages and what it's gonna be in its future condition, so. All that's you'll have to input those soil types and stuff, but then it does the subtract, the conversion for you. Next slide. So, one of the reasons why we want this done is so that it can help us to make sure that that new site plans are adhering to our enhanced stormwater treatment standards. So this was a new addition to these site review regulations. And this is a requirement of the MS4 permit. And it says that any new development, anything, that any new impervious surface needs to be treated to 80% TSS removal, 50% total nitrogen, from the total post-construction impervious area. And then redevelopment, if you're not touching the existing impervious, you don't have to, let's see, let me make sure I get this right. Redevelopment, any existing parcel, yeah. 30% of the existing impervious cover needs to be treated, and 100% of any new impervious cover needs to be treated to those same standards. Next slide. Right now, I'll be producing this report, but basically there's an export out of PTAP that then puts it into an EPA spreadsheet that does the calculations for the removal rates of these BMPs. So this is that same project. That bottom chart there you'll see says for each one of the different BMPs that were listed, we're getting 100% TSS removal and generally 80% nitrogen and phosphorus removal for each one of the BMPs that are being installed. So, pretty clearly we can see that they're meeting the stormwater requirements, the enhanced stormwater treatment requirements. Next slide. So that's it. That's what the PTAP application is. That's why I wanted to bring it to this work session. All that information should be, I think, readily ready for this point in the process. But just so you guys know, the city's using it, it's for their own internal uses. We have to track how much, and are required to try and reduce the amount of nitrogen that the city is discharging to the Great Bay watershed. And so we're tracking all of any BMPs that we're installing as part of city projects, as well as all of our non-structural BMPs like catch basin cleanings, leaf collection, fertilizer control programs, and so forth. So yeah. Any questions? Yeah.
In terms of they have to report on their initial project, how about the follow-up, follow-on years? Is that part of the requirement, or is that?
So we do have that requirement. That's been a requirement since, I think, the 2006 permit, the long-term maintenance.
Yeah.
So this is gonna be an easier way for us to follow through with those long-term maintenance requirements that we already have.
But
So
they
right-
don't have to input the data all over again.
They
They do.
yeah, we're still working out how that's gonna work.
Okay.
Yeah, because my thought is that it'll go through view permit, and they'll use that as a form to, as an annual inspection report, and they can fill it out themselves, and submit it. And, but all those, there's no new requirements for that long-term maintenance. They still need to provide that as part of the TAC requirements of, showing what their long-term maintenance would be on each one of these BMPs. And this will just be a way for us to follow through with monitoring that's actually happening.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Yeah. So right now, I think we've got like 4 submissions so far for PTAP applications. I'm the person who reviews them to see if they meet the requirements for the application. And, you know, it's still a work in progress. There's some nuances to how you put the data in, so if there's anybody who has a problem, doesn't seem to be generating the correct results, you know, forward those comments and questions to me. The UNH Stormwater Center, the people who developed the application are, you know, very helpful and, you know, have been working with developers individually on their individual applications to help them get it in correctly, so, yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
That's just,
Peters, if you
oh,
want.
that's Peters?
Yeah,
All right, thanks. Talk to you soon.
yeah.
Stuff off. 3 point, or 325 Old Harbor.
You see no issues with the? Yes, because it's a hotel.
I know.
So,
Over here.
yeah.
It's pretty minor.
I'll go do it just in case.
Okay.
Yeah. Roman and Law
Um,
is a lot easier to meet.
All right, the first item,
Clearly hotel.
or the second item on the agenda is 70 Court Street. Who's here for that application?
Good afternoon. Chris Mulligan, representing the applicant. I also have with me Eric Sari from Altus Engineering, the project engineers on this project. This is, I think, relatively straightforward. The applicant has got a variance application pending before the Board of Adjustment, which will be heard next week, to get relief, among other things, to convert the existing office building at 70 Court Street into a 8-room boutique inn with a caretaker residence. In order to do that, we're going to need a use variance to sort of bless that specific use in that location. But we're also going to need to come before the planning board for a conditional use permit because the amount of parking that we have on site is deficient. We currently have 4 spaces on site. The proposal, which you will see in the proposed site plan, increases that to 5, but that's still short and leaves us with a deficit of 6. So we will be filing, assuming we get the variances we need, our plan is to file for a conditional use permit to modify the amount of parking that we need on this, in this location. So beyond that, I don't have a whole lot of information for you. There's a couple of things I think you can see on the plan that in consultation with various members of the planning staff, we've added, including a speed bump in the rear of the building. This is, I think you might all be familiar with this, but this is a property that is adjacent to 2 other properties that kind of connect to each other and act as a kind of a thoroughfare or cut-through. So there tends to be some traffic traveling, although there aren't any permanent easements that we're aware of. There tends to be some traffic moving from one lot to the other. So one of the things we're going to do, or we're proposing to do, is put a speed bump in there to mitigate some of the traffic flow. We're also going to dress up the rear of the building, replace some of the pavement with pavers, do some landscaping, things of that nature. But the relief we're going to need from the planning board would be a conditional use permit to approve less than the required amount of parking. We have a couple of options, one of which would be a shared parking arrangement with a property that's, 4 or 5 doors away on Middle Street. Another would be acquiring parking passes at one of the city's facilities. And we're really just here to kind of hear any suggestions you might have or what direction you think would be the most appropriate for us to take in that regard. We, understand that I think the next submission deadline for full TAC review is, I believe, the 15th, which is also the date we're going to be before the zoning board. So we will likely attempt to get something filed by then and then perhaps supplement it or modify it based on what happens at the zoning board.
All set?
I think so.
Any questions from TAC members?
I have some.
Okay.
Is this gonna go through a full site review? Where we look at everything? Or are we just looking at the,
I think we're just looking at the conditional use permit. So I think there are no other
There's
utility or
nothing
site
changing on the
changes.
site except we're shuffling some parking and adding some green space and some pavers. I mean, there's nothing technical or really planning oriented. There's no new building or anything.
you will need a sprinkler system.
Yep.
So, and I'm not sure that your egress is adequate either. Or a hotel use.
On sheet C1, note 1, it states the plan set is intended to depict the redevelopment for restaurant use.
That was obviously the last plan where I took this title block.
Gotcha.
No restaurant proposed here.
So I'm not familiar with the site or the building, but do you have, where it's a change of use, do you have combinations for accessible entrances? Because it looks like you have stairs. In other words, is there any
The-
roll-in opportunity or ramp, or how does that work?
We'll have to look at that. The project architect's gonna have to do a full code review on everything.
Okay.
So,
Where will they, I guess the biggest concern is where they're gonna park in the winter when they can't park on the street.
Well, so, again, we have an opportunity to utilize a shared parking arrangement with property that's owned by the same owners in a short distance away. Or we could, there are a number of public parking facilities in a relatively close close distance from this property. So it's probably going to be a combination of those two. We expect, because of its location downtown, that guests in this type of facility, it's going to be kind of, get your car somewhere and leave it, and then, it's obviously a very walkable part of town. So, we would expect that the type of clientele we're going to see are going to be people that will park and leave their vehicles and not make multiple trips once they're here.
So you'll have some kind of notification for people staying at the inn and in the park.
Yep.
And it seems like, I don't have the standards in front of me, but for conditional use, you can either go with a shared parking or just ask for a complete relief. Which is your approach you're gonna take?
Well, I guess that's kind of what we would like a little input from, this body, if you can give it. We're certainly committed to shared parking if we can pull it off and if that's what it will take. If it's not, if people don't deem it necessary, then we'll probably just ask for relief. But, if anybody has any strong feelings about it one way or another, that would be beneficial for us.
I don't really have a strong feeling about it. Anybody
The only
else?
consideration I have is in the wintertime, as you mentioned, is it going to present a hardship for finding parking? That's the only question I have, and I'll defer to staff if that becomes a bigger issue.
I'm good with, I'm good like Peter, and I think you're answering your question, not needing shared parking to make it work. I think that, I'm not the parking expert,
running that department, but I think there's general availability on that section of State Street to be able to park most of the year, and I think we do a great job removing snow that, you know, for the overnight, they're gonna need to be probably off the street in the garage, but.
Yeah.
Because my understanding of what we do in a shared parking agreement, or the ordinance requires some kind of covenant between two property owners to provide off-site parking. The covenant isn't permanent for a million good reasons. It's basically a lease agreement that's revocable. It's a long-term parking commitment, so if this inn is successful and it's here for 30 years, it's gonna exceed anything we'd come up with anyway that meets the letter of the law for a covenant. And then we'd be in that predicament anyway, when it expires. Because the permit doesn't expire when the covenant expires, the covenant just expires, unless I'm missing something. See, follow that? So, yeah, I'm good with you asking for relief in the absence of a shared parking arrangement. Might be better for your inn to have it, but I don't think it's required.
Well, you know, I mean, obviously, it's gonna be a business decision for the
Exactly.
operator of the
That's the
inn
way I do it.
to, you know, provide whatever amenities the clientele
Need,
expects.
yeah.
But, you know, in terms of acquiring municipal approvals, you know, I tend to agree with that philosophy myself, that, you know, that it shouldn't be, you know, necessarily dictated. One other question we had, or I had, in moving forward with this, in order to obtain a conditional use permit, the ordinance requires that we produce a parking demand analysis. And, you know, for a project of this size, it wasn't our intention to go out and hire, you know, Coral and Palmer to do a, you know, a full-blown engineered study. You know, is that typically acceptable? Or, you know, will you be expecting that? Will the planning board be expecting
I
that?
think, what was it, Woodbury Ave had a pretty rudimentary parking demand analysis. I forget the name, the barber shop.
Yeah.
They had a
Okay.
pretty straight, I mean, they talked about what they had for uses, you know, one chair and how many people would come in, and.
Got it.
So I think if you can talk about how many, I think, and maybe. you
Yeah,
guys,
I agree.
Okay.
Maybe include description of available parking in there, because we're talking
Yeah.
about six spaces. I mean, that's not, I mean, we're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
gonna do a, you know, a parking analysis for 6 spaces.
How many people might be at the inn, how many cars you might end up having, what your projection is. The business owner must do this anyway.
Sure. Okay.
Are you outside the downtown overlay district?
Just outside.
So I
It's
mean,
right
there's
across
4 of the
street.
6 right there if
If
you were
we were
in
in,
it, across
yeah.
the street. So that's not unimportant for
Yeah.
people that don't know what that means. If you're in the downtown overlay, you get a credit of 4 because of the presumption of the presence of public parking, so.
So we were just
Have that
outside.
in your report.
Okay.
Would you have one of these spaces that would be set aside for people who are dropping off their luggage, for example? Like, what happens if all 5 of these spaces are full? Is during the day when there may not be available parking, Mark Street and the adjacent street are both narrow. Mark Street, I believe, is one way.
You know, we could probably talk about signage that would leave one of the spaces open as a loading space, you know, during certain times. I think we would want to maintain it to be an overnight parking space, you know, permanent parking space. But yeah, I think that's a good idea.
And you are proposing caretaker residence as part of this inn, right?
Yep.
So for that person, is there gonna be a designated space?
Well,
or do
no,
you-
that's the person that we're gonna, you know,
Yeah.
have the most control over, so
Right.
they're gonna be hoofing it no matter what.
You didn't?
Um,
Okay, I'm just
Yeah,
pulling it up.
but so no, they would not be on site.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that you have to do it, but it's worth considering whether there's a way you could provide one of those spaces as a handicap spot, which might double as you're loading it, even though that might not be it.
Can you do that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But, you know, can it be used that way? Probably. It's your property.
In reality, yeah, people could use it if it was
Yeah.
open, but I gotta look.
Could be accessibility preferred, but.
Something
Yeah,
like
something like
that,
that.
just to be fine, you know, because,
It's all about where it goes, though. If there's an ADA route two somewhere, because you got the back stairs. It's
Yeah.
kind of like.
That way someone
Duly
kind of
noted,
insulting,
just see
"Hey,
if you
park-
can
park
make
here,
it,
88 person,
know.
go up the stairs, it doesn't really. work.
What's the little thing hanging out to the left of the second spot there, the spot that says two? Is that a light?
That
or
is a light, yeah.
Is it there now?
It is there now.
'Cause, I mean, what would probably make sense to me is either one of those two spaces have the ability with some kind of surface to be a little wider. So if you had a mobility impairment and it wasn't a handicap spot, you'd know to go there and either load, unload, or, I don't know, I'm just thinking out
I want
loud.
to review your accessibility standards because by law, you will be required to designate a certain percentage. So you're going to have to figure that out one way or
Yeah,
the
at
other.
this point, we need one no matter what.
That's what I meant to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then also look at your van. So in other words,
Yep.
depending on how many units you have, do you have to have a van or is it
Yeah.
just simply accessibility? Yeah, and you'll have to have your designer provide that as part of the code review.
So now, Nick, if we expanded that space number 2,
Yes.
does that get us into the front yard? and
I
require
don't know that
relief?
you need to go, what I'm suggesting you do is not expand the width of the space, but where you're gonna landscape near that light,
Yeah.
you actually put some textured pavers or something in the landscape island that you could stand on that wouldn't be parking, but would make it more comfortable for somebody to get in and out. I'm just, again, thinking loosely here. It's a work session.
Yep.
I also think we do not want a speed bump. You want a speed hump. You want that to be more subtle, not spilling your drink going over it. It's just to get people to wake up driving through there, not need a 5-point seatbelt.
Okay.
Speaking about that speed bump, is that for travel between this property and the adjacent one, number 82? And are there easements for travel across the two properties?
My understanding is there are no formal easements for travel across the properties, but I think the longstanding practice, I think everybody in the neighborhood will tell you, the longstanding practice has been that there is through traffic. The property that we're talking about, number 70, is owned by the same principals that own Point and Walder next door. So, they've got an ocean of asphalt back there for parking. And there's an apartment building next door to it that also has, pretty much all pavement in the back. So I think between Porter Street and Mark Street, there's a fair amount of traffic going through there.
So Chris, just to make sure we're hearing you right, I mean, the answer is there's people moving back and forth. You're gonna need an easement on that. If
I don't see a way
not,
you can
not an
park
in-
in that far right parking spot without crossing into number 82's property.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
who's
I
to
mean-
say somebody buys 82 and puts a fence along?
Right, we
along
can't have
there?
that, nor can you.
Okay. Well, there are a bunch of lawyers, so I'm sure we can.
Well, you
work
know what,
something out.
even if it's some sort of floating easement that allows everybody in the future to mutually agree to move it, if
Yeah.
there's something happens that you can't foresee, but it needs to be there to protect everybody.
I think there's a few handicap spaces behind 82. Maybe we could put them in the easement as well, if we needed to.
You just
Say, hey,
need an easement to.
Yeah, we would definitely need an easement for that. We had actually thought, we had bounced a couple of ideas regarding restricting access, either by a fence or a gate or something like that, but none of those really make a whole lot of sense, in my opinion, and I think they would raise some safety issues in terms of access back there. So I think the consensus is to leave it open as it is now, but do what we can to mitigate traffic. I mean, it's an existing condition that, has just evolved over time, and it doesn't seem to be unworkable. But
It also seems like a benefit to everybody, including emergency services.
yeah,
I'll take that, right, Pat?
Yeah, actually, they
Didn't
did
come out of
work
this
on
corner
the
there.
building on the other side of Mark Street when they had staging up, and we had to make sure that we would have access to that parking lot at the time. That was just about a
Yeah.
month ago.
yeah, I remember that.
you know, seeing that that striped area come down is a little odd. Surprised you showed us that.
It's there.
Is there, how many, so this is an old photo, 2008 on Google Street, but it shows 3 spaces instead of 2 adjacent to the,
The existing survey shows 2 up by the building and 2 up along the fence line, but I think in front of that light pole, people will squeeze in if they need to. And that 3rd space on the right-hand side on the bottom, it's not there, it's not demarcated, but people do park there from what we can tell. But officially, there's only 4 spaces existing. Yeah.
Does it make sense to any of you? I think I mentioned this when I met with you guys, the applicant, a week or 2 ago. Does it make any sense to make the throat of that curb cut a little bit smaller than it is in order for that first car that's there to not be hanging out in the driveway?
I brought it down, the new little bit of grass we're adding, I brought it down to the end of the brick sidewalk. So I figured
Okay,
that
so-
was the logical
all
place
right.
to stop.
I'll stop talking. Obviously, there's a lot of quirkiness here.
Oh, yeah.
Best fit, that's what we're looking for.
Any other comments, or are you all, any questions?
Can I ask one more? What are you doing between the 2 buildings? Somebody parks there now? In that, what happens in that white space
Right-
that's
right there?
shared between the 2, yeah?
I think somebody does cram themselves in there.
So, just a question to consider, it's a work session. You probably have a piece of mechanical equipment there, that little box, but I can't tell, not the dark one, but whatever the light box is. You know, sure would be great if there was a way to deepen that parking space, so you don't need a Fiat 500 to park there without blocking the driveway.
I will take a look at that. No promises, I gotta find out what
I
that,
hear you.
if
It's
it's
2 people
HVAC.
too, yeah. Get your truck in there, Dave, we'll work it out.
Yeah.
All set?
I think with the 9 rooms times the 1.25 would equal 11.25 spaces, which would round up to 12, not 11.
Oh, I think I think I can explain the discrepancy there. The way I've calculated it is that we need 10 spaces for 8 hotel rooms and 1 space for an apartment that's 700 square feet or less. So perhaps I calculated that wrong. But that's how we came up with that
Okay.
number.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we looked into that, so that's why we're quiet over here.
I mean, it's gonna
We
need
will.
relief.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no matter what.
There's no
Not leaving
question.
you out there. We'll look at it.
But if that caretaker apartment's less than 750 square feet,
Mhm.
we need
One
to.
space.
One space.
Correct.
And again, that's the easiest one for us to deal with, because that's the
Yep.
space we're gonna have the most, or the user we're gonna have the most control over, so that's kind of the least of our problems.
Sounds good.
Okay? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Those pavers at the foot of the stairs? Yeah.
I listen to you.
Just checking.
All right, next on the agenda, we have 230 Commerce Way.
Good afternoon, everyone. Neil Hanson with Time Bonds. So, project we're looking at is at 230 Commerce Way. The existing parcel has the 3-story office building and then a large parking area behind it. And then it abuts the large wetland area that is between Portsmouth Boulevard and, was that Market Street there? So the proposed project would be adding another 2-story office building to that rear parking area. The first floor would be a vet clinic, and then the second floor would be general office. We will be seeking a special exception for the vet care use, which is only allowed by special exception. We're also going to be needing a conditional use permit for the wetland buffer impact. As you can see from this, the existing conditions plan anyway, the existing parking paved area is already impacting the 100-foot, is it the 100-foot? Yeah, the 100-foot wetland buffer. And the proposed project will be reducing the impervious cover within that buffer. So there's currently approximately 3,000 square feet of impervious within that buffer, and the alignment layout we're looking at on this page here has approximately 750 square feet of impervious, and then also about 5,500 square feet of restoration area. We will be doing some minor modifications to the parking area to allow for that building and some better circulation to the rear of the site, as well as we're proposing to add a driveway off of Portsmouth Boulevard with a dedicated turn lane for that left turn onto the site. We did a quick look at potential traffic impacts on the site. So the vet use, we're moving from across the street, which is at 215 Commerce. So that would be, we're just basically moving the use across the street. So there'd be no additional trips for that. And then the second story, that additional 12,000 square feet of office, would be approximately 20 additional trips. So it's pretty negligible increase in traffic for this
Not gonna
proposal.
leave that space where the vet was vacant, I assume?
I mean, something else would go in there, so, yeah.
I'm not sure you can just discount that.
Right, yeah, we'd have to look at whatever that square footage is, but if it goes back to another office use, it would be, it'd be about half the number of trips for an office use compared to the vet. So unless another vet went in there, it would be just those additional office trips. But
Are you saying the vet across the street? Or in this,
What
on
other
the
vet are you
site?
talking
So
Vet-
there's a vet clinic at 215 Commerce, which is,
where on there?
it's on the bottom left of this page.
Okay,
Oh.
the next parcel.
One of the buildings on here already.
Yes,
Okay.
Over here.
right, yeah, right where your cursor is.
Over
Are they
there.
moving?
That would be, yeah, so they would be the tenant on the first floor.
They're the proposed tenant.
On the first floor.
Okay.
What's on the second office?
General office, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and then obviously whatever went into that, I mean, something's gonna fill that space, so it's kinda hard to know exactly what would go there. But either way, it's pretty low change in traffic. And then as far as utilities, we'd be looking to pull water, gas, and electric from Portsmouth Boulevard, and then connect. There's an existing sewer running through the site that we'd be proposing to tie into. Stormwater would be adding, detention treatment as necessary. Obviously, have to go through the design on that. That's the general overview of the project. And was there any questions, comments?
What's the treatment of stormwater now?
As far as I know, there is none for that rear parking lot.
Is it all sheet flow? Or is it just catch basin, just all sheet flow?
I think it's all sheet flow,
Wow.
yeah.
Amazing. So how old is this? 20, 30 years?
It's the original building, I think.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
it's pretty,
Tired.
but yeah, that's a good way to describe it. So yeah, all the area in the back we'd be capturing and detaining and treating as necessary. So as stormwater perspective, would be a pretty significant upgrade for what's out there now.
And I see the outfall that you're proposing. Is that just an initial concept?
Yes, yeah.
Because you're thinking I'm thinking you might want more than that, like a rain garden or something.
Yeah, and,
Might
we
need
we
one.
still have to do some site investigations to find out if we can do infiltration or
Yep.
any sort of green BMP, as opposed to what we're just showing is obviously very conceptual.
Speaking of green BMPs, the salt storage on the site,
Yes,
can you take a look at that when you bring the application in?
yeah.
Make sure it meets our regulations.
If you didn't say it already, same for lighting.
Yeah.
How big is the vet place across the road that's moving in here?
I don't have
Is
that
this a
number.
significant expansion?
I'd have to look into that. Yeah, I don't know.
Pat, did you have, were you ready to say something?
A couple, fire suppression system going in, I assume.
Yeah, I would assume so. But that would be up to the building designer or the code, whatever.
Yeah, I'm not sure about,
I don't know what would be required. I'm not familiar with building code. But yeah, that would be something the architect would have to look at.
And then the access around the side and the rear is pretty narrow for fire department access.
Okay.
Should be 20 feet.
It's the same even with a two-story building?
It may be affected whether or not there's a fire suppression system in there.
Okay.
What's the length and the width of the building?
Good question.
80 by 80?
It would be,
Square footage.
yeah, it's basically
No, it's less.
square, so I don't know.
120.
Or square root of
I mean, I measured it,
60 by 60 about?
Oh, it's bigger than that. It's,
Yeah, I
it's
think
like
it's more than
120
100.
squared. I mean, you've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 parking spaces on one side and it's another
111,
3, 4.
111 if it was square.
140,
So-
130?
112, really.
What?
If
One?
it's square, it'd be 112.
Okay, so it's about that.
Okay.
yeah, so
Be
you
good to see,
weekly would
are the
be-
architecturals in there?
No, they're
Okay,
not.
and where the entryway is and how that's treated up, presumably on the front. Be good to see that on the elevation.
Yeah, yeah.
Your sidewalks look like they're 5 feet wide. You're gonna want them all of that with the overhanging cars. That, you know, when they pull into those parking spaces.
Yeah.
Some people are gonna put their bumper over the sidewalk. So you need to make sure they're wide enough you can still walk in front of the car.
I expect based on the size of the building, even without a suppression system, you're gonna need fire department access.
Okay.
I got a couple more
Go ahead.
things. So I appreciate all the reduction of buffer impact. Just check our regs because new impervious surface in the buffer is supposed to be pervious unless you demonstrate otherwise. So you have to have a reason why you wouldn't make it pervious pavement.
Okay.
What's left, I know you're removing impervious pavement, but maybe that's your argument, but just keep an eye on that section.
Mhm.
And then, there's some pretty narrow slivers you got on here. Just make sure your delineation is up to date.
Yes, that is, so, and I didn't mention, but we are gonna be at Conservation Commission tomorrow for work session.
Yep.
And we do have, Gove Environmental is gonna be, the wetland scientist, so they'll be making sure that we're all
Okay.
up to date on all the wetland, components of this.
Yeah, just check the boundaries in these areas in particular.
Yeah.
Let's have a Portsmouth Boulevard address. Too bad Jamie's not still here.
I believe that is the intent of the applicant.
We would wanna get that squared away.
Okay.
We can just make it a condition.
It would have to be a Portsmouth Boulevard.
It's that easy.
We can do that then.
comments? Dave, do you have?
Couple things. So, when the city rebuilt Commerce Way a couple of years ago, we never found the water main.
Okay.
So the original development had a cul-de-sac in front of 230. It did not attach to Portsmouth Boulevard at the time. So the water was actually fed for this building, because it was the first building. It was actually fed from Portsmouth Boulevard. And we don't know where that main is. It's somewhere between these two buildings, the proposed and the existing. So we're probably gonna task you with finding that water main and using that for your water survey.
Okay.
And then discontinuing the other end wherever it attaches to Commerce Way from the other side, because right now we have to turn 3 valves off to shut the development off, because we don't know where the connections are. And we didn't have permission to dig holes in the parking lot like Gophers. But we tried ground penetrating radar, we tried everything that we could possibly think of, to try to find that water main, but it's AC pipe, so you can't trace it. So you're just gonna come upon it, and there it's gonna be.
Sounds like fun.
It's gonna be real fun, yep. Should be a good time for somebody.
Thanks, Dave.
You're welcome. The electrical that you're showing is coming off of a little tiny transformer that right now is just powering the irrigation system and the street lighting on Portsmouth Boulevard, so that's not real. You're gonna need to run to a electric manhole somewhere
Okay.
to get primary. And then you're gonna have to deal with the irrigation system. You're also gonna impact one of the lights on Portsmouth Boulevard, so you're gonna have to show us what you're gonna do with that, so that we don't lose lighting on the street. Neil, I'd like you to move the driveway about 15 feet to the right, so that you're not impacting the catch basin that right now is in the driveway,
Okay.
so that that catch basin can still be on curb line, and then you can start your radius after that. Shouldn't affect anything in the buffer zone.
Okay.
Uh,
Right, you mean you're closer to market?
Closer to market.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. I think we should require a fence behind the building, so that people who are walking their pets that go to the vet aren't walking around, and that also collects trash before it blows into the big wetland back there.
Especially on the Market Basket side. There is a trail on the on the Portsmouth Boulevard side that they'll want to connect to, but they should designate that and mark it, and I agree. Fencing off those areas behind Market Basket might be a good idea, because it's steep for one, and there's a lot of trash back there. It'd be nice to protect that a little bit.
So I don't think it's unrealistic to ask you to treat all the water behind 320, even the areas that you're not touching. I understand that the area in front of 320 drains south toward the next building, so that would be out of bounds really, but we're gonna want you to try to pick up all the flow that's behind the building, so we can at least get that treated. And last, but certainly not least, city's gonna request that you build a sidewalk on Market Street from Portsmouth Boulevard to Granite Street, which is about 215 feet, more or less, and put in a pedestrian crosswalk across Market Street from Portsmouth Boulevard across Market Street, so that people can walk through there without having to go up and over that bridge. Part of that will be that island that's in the middle is wide enough for a pedestrian refuge, so you have push-button activation in the island as well. The signals are all set up for walk lights, but you'll need 3 ped poles with buttons, crosswalks across Market Street, and then 215 feet of sidewalk.
Is this way? Here you are.
Anything else from anyone?
Yes, the proposed sewer connection would need a manhole at that location. It's just shown direct piped into the sewer main currently.
gonna look at the infiltration record on this cross-country line too, Neil, just to verify that we don't have any issues in there, but
Okay.
we should know that before you come back. Dumpster will have a fence around it, I assume.
Yes.
Mulch, any mulch in the parking lot around the building should be either non-combustible or approved by the fire department.
Gotcha.
And where you're putting landscaping in the buffer, it's a restoration plan, so I'm sure Gove will be keyed in on that, but I'm sure
Yep.
you're gonna provide wetland buffer plantings.
Yeah. And yeah, Gove will be.
We could talk about that tomorrow. You'll get an earful of that.
All right, anything else? You all set, Neil?
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We done, right?
I thought we were, I don't know.
Yeah, so
You guys-
are you, we don't have anything, we didn't have a submission for,
Yeah. What are you here for?
What are you guys here for?
325 Little Harbor.
Yeah, we submitted it, a number of places actually, on Viewpoint.
A couple weeks ago.
I have a USB drive.
we don't have, let me see,
We were asked to submit,
you said,
through the TAC website. We originally submitted through the planning board website because our project, was just a wetland CUP and it's residential, but Peter, I think you and Ray asked that we come here for the utility review.
Yep, for a TAC application, because all the line in the street.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we originally submitted it through the original planning board application, and then 2 days later, we submitted it through the TAC website because a staff member had asked us to do it that way instead.
Is this a work session?
This is a work session,
I
yeah.
mean, I think if people want to review it, it's not the end of the world.
No, we could, if
No
you guys have
decision's gonna
time.
be made.
I don't know. It wasn't on the agenda, so.
Is this complicated? I mean,
No, why don't
who's
you-
seen it before? What?
Did you, do you?
Well,
have-
nobody's seen it before, because
Yeah,
it's new.
I brought it
but-
down when I saw
Can you,
them.
can you pull the application and put it up on?
Yeah, at least sniff test.
You have it on a thumb drive. They have it
I
on,
have
uh,
it, yeah.
Steph has,
oh, you had it?
Steph went and got it.
Oh,
Yeah, I saw them here and I realized what they were here for. So, Hannah, did you submit a TAC work session application or just a regular TAC application? There was an email from a staff member, I'll have to check who it
Okay.
was.
We can
But
figure it out.
she told us to submit it, she like gave me the link to the direct, like.
Okay. Well, we can
website,
figure
so
that
I'm
out
not
later,
sure which
but.
one that was.
it must have been Kim. Kim or Isaac?
Isaac.
Isaac?
So that's the cover letter. There should be another PDF in there.
Yep, that looks like it.
Maybe you can summarize the letter and talk us through the proposal, just to
Sure.
remind everybody.
So my name's Hannah Giovannucci, civil engineer with TF Moran. Here with me I have Corey, also with TF Moran, and Bernally of Severino Construction. Again, we're here for 325 Little Harbor Road, where this is a residential property. It is a private island. It's also known as Lady Isle or Belle Isle. And again, we're here just on behalf of doing the utility design to share that with you. Normally residential applications, don't need a TAC review, but based on a lot of the activity that we're having going in Little Harbor Road and connection in Sagamore, I think it's beneficial that we hear input from the city as well. Bernie's actually doing the Sagamore sewer extension project, so hopefully you trust him with that. You'll trust him on this private project also to do kind of the same area. You don't trust him at all. I don't blame you.
And just a little interjection, we have been before the Conservation Commission. We were slated to go to the Planning Board in December. Peter and Ray contacted me and said, hey, the utilities here are pretty complex. We want you to come before TAC for a review of those utilities.
And
we
nicely
agreed.
enough, he did that just before we were going, so we weren't stuck at planning board.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing really is that it's in the public right away, and it's a whole new sewer service for the street, really, so.
Let me see if I can get this to work. Probably
I don't think so.
No,
You
it's
just
not.
tell me what stages.
So I'll just do a quick
private.
overview of just
Little-
the structures
the
that are on the
driveway is
site
private.
first, just big picture before we go into the actual design. If you could go to sheet, scroll down, I'm just gonna look at the utility plans.
Here?
11, yep. And we'll just rotate between 11 and 12, if that's all right. So we have, currently on the island, we have an existing dwelling. It's a two-story house. There is also a cottage, and then there's also a carriage house, a barn, a shed, another barn. So there's a lot of structures on here already. So what we're gonna do is demolish the existing building, or the existing dwelling, and do a two-story home. We're gonna renovate, it's a historic cottage, which will be an accessory dwelling unit, but it's just like a guest house. There's also gonna be a new garage that's built. There'll be a pool and pool pump house area. We're gonna renovate a barn that's closest to the tennis court. A barn that's over where this like horse paddock area is gonna be relocated. And also the shed near the dock is going to be replaced as well. So obviously we have a lot of utility connections that need to happen to get all these buildings to function properly. So towards the bottom of the page, we have a bridge there. So the existing site is serviced by existing water. It's a 2-inch main, and what happens is it's constantly freezing. So, and it's not insulated either. So it just freezes as it goes over, so that's a huge issue. It's also serviced by a septic system, which is just kind of right in front of where the proposed house is. And then also to the north, there's an overhead utility line that connects from Pleasant Point, which is pretty unsightly. So our hope is that we can provide all of the new connections via the Belle Isle Road right there. And that is, if you go to the next page. So the top right is kind of where the island is, all the way to the right. So as you're going left, you're going closer towards Little Harbor Road. So we have a 4-inch water main. We're planning on using C900 PVC. That's gonna be insulated as it goes underneath the bridge. And that's gonna connect all the way over towards Little Harbor Road. If you can scroll towards the bottom, we're gonna do a wet tap right at the end of the driveway. The driveway from Little Harbor Road to the island is about 1/3 of a mile. So we're gonna do wet tap there, stainless steel with gate valve. We also, adjacent to that, we're next gonna do a gas connection. The gas is gonna go all the way down to Sagamore, which is all the way to the left. And from where the driveway is to Sagamore, that's about 1/2 a mile. I understand there's, in the sidewalk of Sagamore, there's a gas connection right there that's 2-inch, so we're gonna extend the main to 2 inches, and then we'll be coordinating with Unitil or Eversource for what the correct size is for our gas main and our MEP. Next to that, if we can go back to the page before, we have sewer. So we're gonna be doing, you might not be able to see it here. We have a sewer gravity that's gonna come right outside of where like the 50-foot buffer is. And there's an E1 pump that's gonna start right there. And it's gonna travel underneath the bridge. Again, that'll be insulated as well. It's a 1 1/4 pipe. And we're hoping to get that to go to a manhole in Sagamore and connect there. That's about almost a mile of stretch for that. And then adjacent to that, we're gonna do electric. We'll do 4 conduits, 2 for just plain old electric, 2 for communications. And that's gonna connect just across the way at a utility pole underground. So that's the gist of the utilities. There's an existing driveway that's already there, so just as doing that, we're just gonna keep everything within those limits, and just repave it, same as it is right now. So I'm looking forward to your comments and advice on this.
You know, we just repaved the road 3 months ago, right?
We do.
I know.
We do, but
This is gonna be repaving the road.
I
again.
know, I'm upset too. Why don't you tell me?
Because last I saw it, you were going the other way to Pleasant Point.
Yes.
Otherwise, I would have said something.
Yeah, no, good point, Dave.
Yeah.
Our
Like,
plan
you'd be
was to
horribly
go,
upset if
our-
we let you dig up that road.
our plan was to go to Pleasant Point. We've worked with DES. We started wetland permitting.
And there was a
And-
salt marsh that's right over there.
We had some geotech work done, and then basically what stopped that was the depth of the mud was not enough. We had to bury those utilities in bedrock. And that became very impactful to fish,
No, I understand.
wildlife.
So you can't do that
cost.
underneath where the bridge is.
Correct.
There's not enough soil where the bridge is to go underneath.
To go underneath
Drill it, as
with,
opposed to trying to heat underneath that little
Ber-
bridge.
Bernie's probably the best to answer this.
No, there's not. That's where the existing water goes now, and it's been repaired, it's been repaired several times on both sides of the bridge. They've had to repair and sleeve another water in because it burst. And
So how are you gonna keep the water warm?
It's gonna be.
Because there isn't gonna be enough water moving through that pipe to keep it from freezing.
Right, it's gonna have the appropriate insulating jacket on it, that, of any typical bridge crossing. And then it'll have a heat tape that'll be also hooked to the generator connection, so it won't fail. We've used it in many applications. I've done it at Liberty Mutual and
Okay,
Dover.
so you're gonna have electrical connection so it's heated all the time.
Yep,
Because that's the only way it's not gonna freeze.
yep.
I guess the biggest issue we have is the sewer. And the obvious question is, why don't you put a septic system in up on the top of the hill where the good soil is and there's plenty of room for a septic system? Because by the time that septic comes all the way down that road and all the way up Sagamore, it is gonna be hideously offensive and odoriferous.
We had
Probably.
I think so.
one other
Good
thought that we
It's
wanted to
gonna
float by you.
Impressive.
One other thought we wanted to float by you. We were discussing potentially using just like a septic tank. So everything would flow into the septic tank, all the solids and a lot of like the actual sewage part would just stay there. And then with the gray water that we would pump out instead. So that way there's no like fumes or anything that would cause corrosion further down in like the gravity part of Sagamore, and it just wouldn't smell.
It will smell. It won't smell as bad. We have other mains that are just as long with force mains, and this house is not gonna develop enough sewerage that you can put in a force main that long, it's just not gonna work. So you really should, the other things we can work on, but the septic, you should be looking at putting a septic system on the island, if you can.
it certainly is a lot less expensive to put a septic system on the island. Part of the reasons we were looking at sewer is we've got to run utilities down that driveway and out, so we're going to be digging up the road
And I know that's kind of
anyway.
like, oh, well, we might as well do it while it's there, but if you understand the nature of sewerage, you will understand that you're gonna create a problem for us downstream. You're gonna have to put odor control systems in and all kinds of things that you don't want any part of.
The other,
Dave, where does the odor escape from?
It'll, actually, when it gets discharged in Sagamore Ave, it'll go into the gravity sewer,
Yeah.
and then it'll go and vent out the adjacent houses. And those are the people that are complaining.
Gotcha. So it'll.
It'll vent
flow
out,
up their gravity.
chimney effect.
It'll flow up their gravity sewer.
Yep,
services
and then, so
yeah.
you'll never smell it at your end, but they'll be horrendously impacted.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Unless others were to
Really,
tie
really,
in.
really, really don't want you to put a sewer force main in.
Okay. What about, Dave, if others along the way tied in to boost that?
If you had
flow?
enough flow, that might be different, but you'd have to have everybody, literally everybody on that road tied in, and then maybe, but
What if-
not guaranteed.
What if we tied in downstream of the last clean-out manhole and Walker bungalow that we're gonna install? Into that 2-inch force main?
So that sewer force main is gonna travel all the way down Walker Bungalow, all the way down Shaw, then all the way back up Sagamore, and that would essentially double the length of time it's in the sewer force main, just by its configuration,
Like, we have a ton of users, I guess, if they tie on.
if they tie on.
If they tie on, there's a ton of users from that manhole to that point.
We wouldn't have a lot of users starting out on the Walker Bungalow area, and that's if they tie on, it would cause a lot of problems in the short term that may not get fixed for
Right.
a long time.
Please put it in a
So we
septic
could,
system.
I guess if we propose to put a dry pipe in, that if everybody on Walker Bungalow, Shaw, et cetera, tied on, he could put a leach bed in now. We simply just install a 2-inch PVC main, so he doesn't have to dig up his driveway until you said, okay, yeah, now you can tie on. Especially
Yeah, I
if
mean,
you
I
have
just
Bell
look at the
Island
nature.
Road by itself is really long.
Right,
So that's
and it's just,
the real issue
what is
is
it,
Bell
2
Island
houses out
Road.
there? I mean, they're big houses, but they're 2 houses.
What'd you say?
They're not gonna generate that kind of flow. You need a
300 gallons.
subdivision.
Yeah, 300 gallons a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what happened in 1996. It was a long time ago, wasn't it?
It sure was, yeah. Yeah, what Dave's talking about is him and I worked on this island back when we were both in our 20s. And there was a lot of concerns then. But I'm with you, Dave, on septic. The only thing in my head that bothers me is most of that island is in the 100-foot wetland buffer.
But not all of it.
Not all of it. There is room on the west side,
Soil up on the
outside
top
of
is
it.
good soil.
The soil's decent.
Yeah, on the left, but
On the
that's a lot of
left.
the wooded area.
Yep. We do have plenty of vegetation left over, that we wouldn't be impairing the natural woodland buffer and the percentage we have to keep. It's just the septic system. I guess we probably could keep it more than 100 feet from the water's edge, get it out of the 100-foot buffer. The concern I had, or the thought I had, was if we can go sewer, why not? And then we don't have the septic concerns so close to the Piscataqua
Again,
River,
it's not-
environmental.
It's the people that you're gonna affect, and you'll never even smell it.
Yeah.
So that's the reason. So, that being said, we're looking at pretty much rebindering the entire section of Sagamore from the driveway to where we stopped. The city is repaving Little Harbor Road this summer. That'll be part of the final overlay, so it's already in the contract for paving. So you get a couple of months to work in before we close the door for 5 years.
That's to get the gas at least. At this
To
point
get
now.
the
it's
gas
just a-
and whatever water connections you need.
Yeah, at this point, it'd be get the gas
Gas,
down, get
water,
the power
electric.
across and tap the water main.
Where are you gonna drop the power to?
The pole across the street from the driveway?
On the far side of Little Harbor Road?
Yes, the opposite side.
So you're going down Belle Isle Road all the way. So you gotta put electrical manholes in every,
It's just,
500 feet.
it's just vaults right now, it's just their pole box.
yeah, well, they're primary pole boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
every
Yeah,
600.
They're big, they're big.
Yeah, it's a
Where's-
4 by, I already designed it with Nick Costco. We've got him up with design.
Certainly have no problem, but that's what's gonna happen. You're gonna have to remove everything that we just did, from the driveway to where we stopped. And then we were planning on going to Sagamore with the overlay, so that part you wouldn't have to pay for, but the rebindering you would.
So it'd be the lane that we're in?
We wouldn't want the lane, we'd want it just like it is.
Okay.
gotta have one more.
I have some.
You really
Okay.
want more?
Go ahead, Ben.
What's the weight limit of the private bridge?
It's currently, it was reviewed by Mike Seifert of, he's now with Horizons, used to be MJS Consulting. And I want to say that it was approved for 70,000 pounds? Yeah, 70,000 pounds.
We're currently under contract with the owner to reinforce the bridge to H20 loading.
I have no idea what
So
that
that,
is.
depending on how many axles you have, basically we could carry on a load at 100,000-pound excavator across it. I'm meeting with DES tomorrow because we're above tide line, to see if they want anything for us to reinforce the bridge abutments and the structural steel. So we're gonna reinforce that bridge so that it'll accept construction equipment for our equipment and for concrete trucks, et cetera. But right now, basically, a loaded 10-wheeler can go across that bridge safely, which covers your fire trucks at this point.
Require fire suppression, or it's a private road?
Yeah, that was, well, how many structures are up there?
7, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4,
Two
5,
residential.
6, 7.
The rest are barns or garages. There'll be they both won't be living in at the same time. There'll be a primary residential building, which is shown right in the middle of the drawing. And just last Thursday evening, we got approval from the planning board for a detached accessory dwelling unit, which is the caretaker's house, which is being renovated. So that will get use, we're told half a dozen times a year, but the primary residence will be a 4 or 5 people family, 5-person family.
And will you be putting a suppression system in both of those?
You're gonna need a blow-off hydrant.
We have one.
Okay.
That 4-inch main's not gonna get a lot of turnover.
Fire suppression, that's a good question. I don't know. I haven't seen, the architectural construction drawings haven't been advanced enough to answer
I
that.
think the last time we discussed this was probably like a year or 2 ago. We were looking to use the seawater to pull it in from there.
For fire suppression?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you do that if you have a 4-inch main?
Well, I think they didn't at the time, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so now you should be able to, because you only need to supply a couple of heads.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 2 heads, really, in each structure. Well, flowing at a time, I should say, which is not a lot. It's like usually around 26 gallons a minute total between the two of them.
So would you like to see fire suppression in the residential buildings?
Certainly in the residential buildings. And then we want to see how the other buildings are being used. What's being stored. The residential are the big ones.
Yeah.
It's a life safety issue.
The other buildings are, so the garage is going to be a 4-car garage. The barn is being converted to it's storage, but there will be some office space in there, a 1-person office with a bathroom.
And it's 1 story.
It's 2-story.
Is the office on the first floor or second floor?
The office is planned to be on the 1st floor.
Maybe we'll look at that, but I'm not as concerned with that. The residential is more important.
Is it a requirement for sprinklers? Could they just do, I think the last time we discussed with them, they didn't want a sprinkler inside?
Why would they not want a sprinkler inside?
Why would they build a
Don't they
building
like
around the house and not put fire suppression in?
Because
Who would do that?
my understanding is if like it goes off almost everywhere,
That's
and
incorrect.
so,
That's only in
no?
the movies, yeah, 1 head at a time. So each head has a filament that melts, and that's how the water flows. So it's only 1 head at a time.
It's only in the movies when one head goes off.
Yeah, the movies is different.
It's a good movie, though. Yeah.
Like private road.
It's just like when they hit the fire hydrant and the thing explodes into the air.
Trigger.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah,
here.
so will only one of these
go off in this room at a
Only
time?
1 road.
Only when the heat gets hot enough to melt
But
it.
each one will come on as in this
The
room.
fire gets bigger,
Yep,
to melt the next
I
one,
get
and then the
that.
next one goes out.
Yeah.
But typically, like, it's 99% of fires that show by a single head.
Yeah.
If there's water.
in a
I
lot
hear that all
less.
the time. People really think that.
Oh, I
They
know
really
that.
think it-
Yeah, I hear that a fair amount.
I hear it
It's
all
the
time,
movies,
too.
I guess, but.
There are ones, it's a deluge system, but like if you were storing flammable liquids or something in a warehouse, you might have a
Mhm.
deluge system where they all go off at once, but not.
Was it
in
older
practice.
buildings too that did that as well? No, okay.
Movies, older movies.
Newer movies too.
Yeah, newer movies.
This
Newer
is
and
what
older
was
movies.
explained to me when I asked why they didn't want sprinklers.
And if they're properly installed and maintained, they will only go off when there's a fire.
Yeah.
So I just want to recap, so we hear you.
Good.
Preference would be to have a septic system, no sewer. But as far as gas, electric, and water, I think we've detailed them on the drawings, no significant concerns. Obviously, they'll be reviewed when we come to
Mhm.
TAC.
Yep.
Fire suppression in the residential buildings. And that's all I've heard so far. Oh,
Repaving in 3
Repaving.
months.
yeah, repaving of Little Harbor Road
It's in
from
the bid, ready to go, so
Yeah.
you have a very short amount of time.
And is that a moratorium that happens, or that just means that we have to, if we
After that,
did
you
go,
would
we
have to
just
rebuild the
repave it
road
all?
entirely again,
Gotcha.
right?
And that's,
Including the speed tables,
that's slated for summer, the paving?
yes,
Okay, so it has to be done by summer.
should be done by July sometime. I will work with you, of course. This is the nature of your excellent client, who has always worked with me.
Thank you.
And thanks for hearing us as well.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
notice.
It's a very, very large residential and very expensive project, and takes many, many permits, and we've been working on it for years, quite honestly, and we appreciate your input and help.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care. All right.
Thank you.
uh,
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you.
Congrats.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.